to tell them. So we had another division that was sort of allowed to call per one policy, but not really. They called. But there was never enough money to call. They didn't want to call. They called, but they didn't send them, so they said, oh, you know. It was just unbelievable. I mean, like, screamed at, sworn at, called all these names, told, you know, I'm stopping it, but there was nothing I could do. I could send a telex, which they may not even get. I could tell someone to call them, and then they'd call them. So everyone was just yelling at everyone.
And all of these statistics were going up to COB, which is David Miscavige.
Yeah, so they could see how much money was made total every week, how many staff there were every week. You know, monitor. We had to compile everything and make graphs on the computer. We had to print them all off. We had to do all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say that statistics in all Scientology organizations are important. Even in the cadet org, which you think would not be that important, I mean, it was like this lowly children's org, we would get yelled at, like because the cadet coordinator would say, we have to report our statistics to INT or to her org, FLO, and they would get angry because I wouldn't have the statistics. We kept counting them wrong, and we didn't even know proper math to figure them out and do the graph. So statistics are a big deal.
It's because there's a policy from L. Ron Hubbard saying, basically, you know, if your statistics are up, you know, if they're going, each week you're supposed to do more than you did the last week, and you're in big trouble if you didn't. So if you write letters, every week you have to write more letters. And you get to a point where you can't write more letters, but that doesn't matter. So when I first went into the Sea Org when I was 14, school was on Saturday. And it was about 6 hours a day on Saturday, and that was it. And they knew that the minimum requirement for school is 20 hours, but it was just ignored.
6 hours a week?
A week.
That was it?
Sorry, 6 hours a week on Saturday. That was it. That was the only school you got. And we were all in one room, and we had a supervisor. He wasn't a teacher. He wasn't trained at all as a teacher. He was just trained as a Scientology supervisor. And we didn't have materials. We didn't have enough books. We just literally, like, sit around, read books, talk, do nothing, really. And I started going to school less and less because on my job, first I was a receptionist. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without someone, you know, covering the receptionist post. So I had to find someone every week to do that, and that was hard. Then when I was the director of inspections and reports, I would go to school and people would say, well, who's covering your post?
Right.
You know, who's doing your job for you while you're at school? You have to figure it out. And
of course, nobody was able to do that.
Yeah, exactly, for a whole day. I mean, everyone's being screamed at for not getting their stuff done. They're not going to go off and do someone else's stuff for 6 hours. And and it was pointless as well because we weren't actually doing school. We were just kind of, you know, it was so disorganized. It's unbelievable. I kept going. They changed it several times. We moved. For a while, we went up to the Pack Ranch where the kids are, so that meant an hour and a half there and an hour and a half back, so 3 hours were taken out of the school that we did do. Because our school would be from like 9 in the morning till I think like 4 in the afternoon. And then part of that was driving up there, so it got to be even less. And then they moved it. Then they decided we have to have the school in the building where you work. So all of us were in one room with another supervisor, not a teacher at all, never taught in her life from what I know. And she had nothing for us to do. She had no idea what to do. So all of us, you know, kids from the age of like 12 to 17, were doing spelling bees, math bees, just sitting around, and then we go to the park. Just killing time for a legal requirement that wasn't even being met, not even close, 6 hours when you're supposed to get at least 20.
And Scientology can get away with this because nobody's going to go report anything to the authorities because they'll be declared suppressive.
Instantly. I wondered so many times, why aren't people from the Labor Department coming here and inspecting? Why are we only getting 6 hours school? The people from OSA, the legal department in Scientology, were saying, you know, we know it's illegal for these children to be working this long, and we know it's illegal for them not to be getting 20 hours of school, and they really should, but it's not being done.
How do you know the people from legal and OSA were saying
because
that?
When I was the DIR in ITO and the DIR in the FLO, part of my job was like the legal...
Rudes.
Yeah, I was
rudiments.
Yeah,
the basics.
I was like the liaison for any legal points between my organization and OSA. Not all the time, because they kept reorganizing, but some of the time. It didn't mean I could actually do anything, but it meant I got told these things. But they were just discussed with no.
You just heard.
One time, well, they did the thing where they said all the minors have to leave at 10 instead of 10:30. I mean, it's completely irrelevant. And then the kids that were really young, there was a boy who was 12 and a girl who was like 13, and a couple other kids who were 12 or 13 were sent to the pack ranch. But then one of them was brought back anyway. But this didn't, it was just a couple kids who were super young, and they looked really young too. Like this little boy was, like this tall, and he worked at the computer all day. So they finally decided they could get in trouble for that, and they sent him away, but he was going to be brought back a year or two later. So I went to school less and less and less and less until I finally stopped going, and no one cared.
Why do you think the Labor Department never came? Do you think it was just covered up so well?
Because no one ever reported it. I just don't think anyone has, because the kids I know who have left who would report it are still in Scientology.
So they won't be going to the authorities?
No.
There was an inspection in Florida way before I even went to the cadet org, where they went and they inspected the kids for bruises because someone had told them. One person had told them. So they went and they inspected them all and they questioned them all.
Somebody had told them what? That they were being abused?
Yeah, some children were being abused. But the people had already kind of like made sure the kids knew what to say to anyone that asked. So the kids were like, oh no.
They were drilled.
Yeah.
Well, if you had been asked,
I would have been like, what? Oh, the school is great. Yeah, I go to school all the time. I'm learning such new subjects.
There was also, there was no real way to handle harassment, because harassment was very common. Being, people yelling at you and swearing at you is harassment, but that was the way things were done. So you couldn't say I'm being harassed from that point of view.